Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am a corporate M&A partner at the law firm Baker Donaldson.
Yay! Why am I saying yay?
Because I don't always say it when we do this, that people think that I am an actual employee of Red Clover. I am not, but I assure you, I work for Red Clover, just not in official capacity.
Now, what else do you do? You should finish introducing who you are.
I see. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our new best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. We are off to a really silly start here today.
Yes, we are. I think we need it.
We need it. It's only Tuesday.
I know, but there's just a lot going on, and I think a little levity is always a good thing.
There is. And our spring break that was only 2 weeks ago feels like it was 3 months ago. I think we need another vacation. But today, we're not going on vacation. Today, we're going to talk about all cool things privacy, because we have Arlo Gilbert, who is the co-founder and CEO of Osano, the leading data privacy platform for simplifying privacy compliance. And you know, here at Red Clover, we like to simplify privacy. Gilbert is an Austin native. He is a high growth leader with more than 20 years of experience in building companies in industries ranging from payment processing and telecommunications to digital health and enterprise software. He has an established track record of conceiving original product ideas, validating demand, building awesome teams, raising capital, and providing excellent returns to investors. And we are excited that you are here today.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Welcome to the silliness.
Or the mayhem.
Silliness.
Mayhem.
Silliness.
Okay.
I win. Your turn.
So Arlo, welcome aboard for today's mayhem. As we like to learn more, talk to us a little bit about how your career has evolved to your current position.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I am the CEO and co-founder at Osano, and sounds like we share a lot of common interests in simplifying things. In terms of my career, pretty stereotypical. In fact, I would say in some ways even a cliche. My background is late '90s. I was headed in your direction. I was on my way, Justin, to being an attorney and studying for my LSATs at the University of Texas. And I ended up with a long story that I won't tell today, but I ended up with about 25 laptops shipped to my house inadvertently by a Korean manufacturer, and could not get them to take them back. And so eventually I sold those on Ubid, a precursor to eBay, and used the funds from that sale of laptops to build my very first company. And thank goodness for the internet, I did not become an attorney. No shade towards anybody who's an attorney, but I think that would not be a place that would make me very happy in the long run. So I built my first payment company. It was payment processing, affiliate marketing platform. back in the late 90s, if y'all remember, nobody really knew what we were doing yet online. And so my lack of experience in many ways was very helpful because I didn't have any preconceived notions about how things should be done. I built that company, sold that in 2009. I built a telecommunications company named iCall. We were a telecommunications provider pre-iPhone. So I was just a cool first letter like E-Trade. And so ran that for a number of years, sold that in 2012. And then since then, I built a couple more businesses. Most recently, Mark Cuban, the Dallas Mavericks, and Shark Tank had backed my prior company, which we ended up selling to TA Associates in 2018. And while we were building that company, we were just like, man, there's a lot of stuff happening in privacy. And so the long story short is that I am a serial entrepreneur, right? And I think I joke with my wife, I think that is the only job where the word serial as a prefix is a good thing. Everything else you can do serial is not good.
I would tend to agree with you. So, what did you notice in the privacy field that sparked your interest to start Osano? And how has all of that experience in SaaS really helped you with what you're building here today?
Yeah, good question. So if you go back in time, not to date myself, but if you go back to the late 90s and early 2000s, everything lived in a single stack, right? You had a server rack in a data center somewhere that you controlled as the business owner, and all your data sat there. And so if you wanted to exchange information with a business partner, inevitably it was, emailing a spreadsheet or something along those lines back and forth. And I look back now with a bit of embarrassment at probably the quantity and lack of consent in the data that we were sharing back then. It was not uncommon to email around lists of credit card payment information between partners and payment processors. So, I had a lot of experience with trading data and kind of being on the dark side of that equation. And then through the years, as I built companies, I'm a technologist at heart, and so as we built companies, I watched this proliferation of cloud sharing, embedded widgets, and I never really understood how we expected anybody to ever reclaim and gain control back of their data. And the analogy that kind of woke me up was I heard somebody make a joke that data sharing is a little bit like a sneeze, in that once it gets out, you can never get it back in, right? And so that was a kind of a first thought that I had. And that was in 2015, 2016, and then when we sold our last company in 2018, we were doing vendor management. All right, so large enterprise procurement solutions and super boring stuff. But what we started having a lot of our customers ask us about was GDPR, right? Are you GDPR compliant? Can you assist us with GDPR compliance? Which really stood out to me as a wildly crazy ask and signified to me that most companies out there really didn't know what they were doing. Because if they were asking me for GDPR advice, and I had to go Google GDPR, then they were probably in bad shape. So as we started seeing more and more of these requests coming through about privacy related questions, I realized that this was an interesting opportunity to do something positive for society, and potentially make a little bit of money at the same time. But our real takeaway from that was that there was this slow drum of privacy beating. Right? It was kind of like you heard about GDPR every so often, started increasing. We started seeing more in the news cycles. We started seeing the Apple and Facebook and the Equifax drama, and it just became evident this was a titanic shift in the way that the internet and data were going to be handled and how it was going to impact business and consumers. And like any good entrepreneur, I wanted to be part of the hot new thing. So, that was the inspiration for getting involved in privacy. Really, was just a lot of experience of being on the dark side, and a lot of experience of having customers and friends asking me, about data privacy.
And privacy is on the upswing and it's cool and hot all at the same time. I never make funnies, but look at me.
There you go. So, looking back on your career, how has your prior SaaS experience shaped how you are deploying and developing this latest SaaS privacy product offering?
I mean, every single startup is a lesson. You tend to learn a lot more from failed ones than you do from the ones that do really well. I think that's a Bill Gates quote. Success is a horrible teacher. But I would say that the things that we really learned in the process of building prior companies, we privacy by design, right? This was something that was not talked about a lot, but good architecture actually generally supports good privacy. And so, if you can assemble your systems in a logical and scalable manner, your odds are pretty good that you're setting yourself up for success in terms of privacy, because it usually means things like you're not using emails as your primary identifier for individuals. There's just a lot of pieces to the puzzle there. But in terms of my prior SaaS experience, I think the biggest thing that we really took away was that the bar for business software is extraordinarily low in terms of usability and lovability. And there's never been a category I've seen where that's more true than in privacy. So many of the products that are out there are just painful to use. And so what we really learned was build something that you want to use, build something that feels intuitive to people who aren't experts, and the odds are pretty good that success will follow. When we look at Canva, Figma as being great examples of that.
The privacy market's changing really quickly. And, since you've been started, your product has also evolved and changed. Can you share a little bit about how Osano's helping companies today manage privacy? What does the product look like today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Osano started out, we had some theories about vendor risk and vendor data as being something really interesting we wanted to build. However, we did acquire an open source cookie pop-up product back in 2018, right after we formed the company. And by virtue of that, we found ourselves with a lot of people coming to us asking about whether we sold a commercial cookie pop-up. And so we quickly pivoted because product market fit, as we all know, is one of the biggest things that puts a startup out of business, is a lack of product market fit. And so when you do find people asking you for a feature or a capability early on in the company journey, it's a good clue that you should probably do what they want. So I tell you this because we had this vendor risk data set. We have teams of attorneys who review privacy policies and cookie policies and GDPR statements and DPAs, and they review them, and then we have an ontology, 163 data points that we look at as being best practices in regards to disclosure, security, consent, all sorts of different pieces of the puzzle there. And while we were building that, we then stumbled upon the cookie pop-up, and that ended up being fortuitous because it turns out that virtually every company in the entire world starts their privacy journey with the cookie pop-up. Right? Love it, hate it. It's definitely a polarizing subject. The yes, I accept cookies button. Many people are annoyed by it. Some people feel like it does something really positive for consumer disclosure. But ultimately, Osano sells a product suite. So think of us as being the toolbox that can help privacy professionals or business executives to build a privacy program from scratch, from cookie pop-ups to rights management, to doing internal assessments, to assessing vendors, to connecting to data sources and doing data discovery. from soup to nuts, we really have every capability that you need. It all started with that cookie pop-up and has grown from there.
Cookies are love or hate. I personally prefer chocolate chip these days.
So, Arlo, you said something interesting about the bar being pretty low for adoption of various types of SaaS or other technology products. I still encounter on a regular basis when people want to do business with my clients, particularly startups, their thought about privacy and security continues to be that it's an afterthought. It's not a core design feature of the technology. But where I'm heading with this with you is I'd love to kind of flip the coin a little bit and ask you, in your experience, when you're talking to businesses, what is the biggest obstacle to adoption of your platform when you're talking to clients?
I think our platform is pretty representative of the general privacy industry, right? Because we make a lot of different features. And so, we tend to catch customers at the beginning of the journey, the middle of the journey, as well as, when they're jumping ship from another provider. And the biggest obstacles that you encounter, there's the startup issue, and then there's the privacy issue. And those are really kind of two independent pieces. So in the beginning, the hardest part was just getting people to trust us and try us because we were an unknown quantity. We were a brand new company without much of a reputation, and we didn't have a client roster to point to. That's always hard, but every startup in the world has to deal with that. So clearly it's something that can be overcome. The biggest obstacle, though, what I would say would 100% be a lack of knowledge and understanding about privacy and the why behind it. And then candidly, a lack of incentive to make privacy a core piece of the puzzle at any business, right? And y'all been around the block. So, I mean, we saw what in 2018, for example, right? The biggest multinational companies in the world, sure, they were building out privacy programs. But aside from that, you go talk to a consulting shop in Oklahoma. They viewed that as being a very European thing, right? They kind of buried their heads. And so the biggest challenge was always about motivating people and creating some sense of urgency and highlighting how this could be a good thing for their business by creating the carrot and the stick. Thankfully, that's changed lately, and now we see so many fines, from Sephora to the Googles, around the globe in the C-suite, general counsels at firms. This is becoming now really top of mind in terms of risk mitigation. So it used to be the biggest obstacle, but now that has shifted a little bit.
So, Arlo, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question because, as you said, at one point, you thought about going to law school, and thankfully your career went down a really cool path with it being a positive serial entrepreneur. So I wanted to use that to frame up this question is reading between the lines of how you just answered the last question. This little thing called CCPA and another 5 states have passed privacy laws has obviously been good about making it become more top of mind. And so what I wanted to understand a little bit from your perspective is how do you view the privacy laws from a perspective of, hey, they're helpful to my privacy business, but then you might be as your entrepreneur side say, you know what, the more of these laws that we have, I almost feel like it stifles innovation because if 50 states have a privacy law, that's a lot of different things to comply with. So I'd love to get the different parts of the Arlo privacy entrepreneur brain versus the Arlo serial entrepreneur who some of this innovation is kind of stifling or legal regulation is stifling. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, look, the internet has become a regulated industry. I mean, full stop. It is up there now. Finance, oil and gas, it is regulated. We're just seeing the beginning of that. So, when you think about these patchwork of state laws, for my business, candidly, that is actually positive, right, the more complex and challenging that it is to comply with regulations, the more that having software in place that can help to, kind of mitigate that risk is a positive thing. Um, from a social good, one of the things about Osano that I didn't mention up front is that we are a B corporation. So we're a public benefit corp as an entity, and we are a certified B Labs corporation, right? So like Patagonia, lots of these kind of crunchy Birkenstock wearing type of companies. And the reason that I say that is because a big piece of why we built this business was around the idea of doing something positive for the world. Right? I don't know enough about climate change. I don't know enough about clean water or education to be impactful there. Data privacy is a place I could be impactful. And I do think that in terms of innovation, you probably see a lot more lawyering happening at companies in terms of data shares. We have seen a huge upswing of companies that want to consolidate onto single platforms to mitigate risk. Again, a positive thing for Osano because we make many products, but the point solution pendulum seems to be swinging back a bit. And I think that can be a negative thing for innovation. But in terms of privacy innovation, I feel like the fines, the patchwork of laws, all of these things, although they may stifle some innovation, I think that a great idea and entrepreneurs who are passionate about building and solving problems are going to find ways to do those within the bounds of what's legal and okay. And what we're really going to see is a reduction in these kind of fly by night business ideas where the only business value they have is buying and selling data, right? That data exhaust. So I'm optimistic.
Arlo, as we were just talking about how the adoption of privacy, and for some companies that are really large, they've been doing it now for a while. For other smaller companies, they're just getting started. I know in our business, we see a number of different functions who kind of quote unquote own privacy. And I'm curious, who do you come across most often, or some of the more common players of who's paying attention to privacy in organizations today?
Yeah, I mean, if you start at the kind of the very top of the pyramid, and you say, what kinds of organizations are most concerned about privacy? Right, these tend to be organizations that have a lot of public-facing brand, right? They've got a well-known brand, so they've got exposure and risk, and they recognize that they are likely targets for attorney generals, private rights of action, regulators in Europe. And those companies are pretty clearly the companies that are driving the vast majority of the buying and innovation in privacy right now. And that is now starting to trickle down into other kinds of organizations. And that affects who the buyer is pretty substantially. So at really large enterprises, and we're talking Fortune 500, which I think about 15% of the Fortune 500 are some customers. At that scale of organization, you tend to have large compliance teams, right? So we've got some large insurers, for example, and large banks that are customers, and they have web compliance teams with 10 to 20 people that do nothing but web property data privacy compliance. When you go down market, right, and that all usually reports into the CISO in some regard, at least it's coming out of CISO budget. Oftentimes we see the privacy teams reporting in there. When you go down below the Fortune 500 is when things start getting scattered, right? And you start seeing some person who is in operations and they got handed privacy almost in a punitive way, like, hey, here, have fun with this one. And so they are then suddenly responsible for both procuring software, finding consultants, engaging with attorneys, and at the same time, just trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, right? They're like we joke about entrepreneurship, they're trying to build the airplane while they're in mid-flight, right? And they hope that they can get the privacy engine put together before the plane hits the ground. So very, very wide swath once you go below the large enterprises. We see marketing, we see legal getting involved, We see a lot of security and IT folks. But of course, near and dear to our heart, CPOs, chief privacy officers, but not a lot of companies have those still.
Thank you for sharing. Always helpful to see what others are identifying in the industry.
So, as we talked in the prelude to having our broadcast today, we talked a little bit about artificial intelligence, and part of your offering in particular, you're going to collect a lot of data and see a lot of different privacy programs, practices, and data collection. As someone who is always looking kind of towards the future, you have any initial thoughts about how AI is going to improve your offering and just how it might be helpful to the privacy industry in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of AI, and we have actually had some AI in our products for a couple of years. One of the things that our product does is we connect to one of our core capabilities is connecting to data sources like maybe your Salesforce, or we're connecting into your Marketo, and we're scanning those SaaS offerings to identify references to Justin, references to Jody, and references to their cars and their VIN numbers and their social security numbers and their IMEI numbers on their phones. And so we have a lot of pattern recognition that is going through and getting context from documents and fields and applications to identify people, and then to surface that in risk mitigation and rights management workflows. So that's how we already use the AI. The ways that I'm really excited about AI for the future of Osano is that we've built this proprietary data set. So I mentioned we have this ontology of 163 points that we look at as being the primary factors that define a good privacy program versus a bad one. But the approach that we took to doing this, we go out and read every compliance document that a company publishes, right? Candidly, it's human attorneys in the United States, bar certified, who are going and spending their days reading documents and then doing the virtual equivalent of using a yellow highlighter on those documents, and then explaining how they interpreted those documents and how they mapped to our best practices ontology. And so if you look at this corpus of data, this ontology, and then this massive archive we have of basically every compliance document that any company has published in the last 5 years, these are the foundations for building some pretty cool AI that can analyze privacy policies really effectively, and can identify risk really effectively purely by reading documents. So we do expect that in the next year, we'll start introducing additional AI capabilities into the tool, although our hope is that it'll be transparent to customers in that they won't feel like, oh, Osano put an AI badge on something so they could charge more money. This is really actually about being able to do a better job for our customers.
Any thoughts, AI man?
I think we're in the top of the first inning learning about this stuff. I think one of the interesting issues will be what kind of data gets put into the software. At least with Arlo's tool, he has the data from all of his customers. But the challenge will be you're going to have to de-aggregate that data because you have massive issues of confidentiality or potential privacy issues if it's somehow be able to be identified with a customer, and that's information that's not supposed to be put onto a tool. And then I'm also reading that most website terms and conditions have statements that say, hey, for AI purposes, you're not supposed to scrape our website. So in essence, you don't have their permission to start scraping the website. But I think for Arlo, if I put on my Arlo hat, really interesting ramifications for having very discrete data sets that are very privacy specific, because that's the industry that both he and you are in.
And your point about aggregated data is super spot on, right? I mean, the challenges that we read about with some of the big AI programs out there, if your data was used in compiling that language model, do you own part of that language model, right? Should you be compensated? Is it your data anymore? There are a lot of deep questions.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Arlo, because I did the global rollout for a large company where they bought an AI tool in the human resources space. And one of the issues we got into in the contract was, as I said, look, you have to deaggregate the data, but if some threat actor comes in and he or she can re-aggregate that or identify people in that data, I was like, that's called a data breach and you need to be liable for that. And what I'm saying is you have to think very differently in these deals now because privacy and security and what's going on with the data plays such a key role. And the typical, in your industry, SaaS or other kinds of boilerplate, it doesn't deal with it. This is all new stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Arlo, with everything that you know in the privacy space, we always like to ask everyone, what is your best personal privacy tip?
My best personal privacy tip would be that on those dinosaur websites that still ask you personal questions like, what was your favorite book when you were a kid? And, if you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? My privacy tip is that the answer is 100% of the time a randomly generated string that I store in my password manager. Because I feel like those questions are a treasure trove for hackers who want to learn a lot about me, or for the companies who want to learn about me. Right? It's posited as a security mechanism, but boy, that's interesting information to have about all of your users.
Very good point.
So the next time I get asked who is your best friend growing up, I'm going to say it was Arlo Gilbert.
There you go.
So, Arlo, when you're not blazing the path in a new SaaS product and the privacy industry, what do you like to do just to have fun?
Well, my investors, I hope they're not listening because I do occasionally take a few minutes off from work. And when I do, I would say that my wife and I are both fanatical crossword puzzlers. So you'll find me every day in the New York Times doing the mini crossword and the spelling bee and the Wordle and all of those things. And it's a healthy combat that we've got in our relationship. So, at the end of the day, we can sit down, and usually I'm usually the one that's doing the groveling as my wife completely decimates me in all of those games. But that would be my biggest hobby. It would be word games.
That's really fun. Well, we've enjoyed the conversation tremendously. Thank you so much. If people would like to learn more and connect, where should they go?
Just head over to osano.com. That's OSANO.com. And one of our amazing team members will be there waiting in chat to help you out and answer any questions if you have them.
Well, thank you again. Like I said, we really appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Jody, Justin, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.